we go. There we go. Good morning. I am continuing my streaming adventures because, like I said, it's my only form of recording. I'm holding this like a powerful orb, but no, JPEG Mafia has turned a totally new leaf. We all find ourselves having midlife crises at 20, at the tender old age of 20 now. And so sometimes we turn to religion to figure out what our existential crisis might mean, what the solution might be. And for some of us, like I said, religion might be that. Now, I'm kidding because I don't think JPEG is having an existential crisis. But if you had to ask him about thoughts and how he felt about himself, he would tell you that he's asking Jesus to forgive him, for he is a thought. That's right. We got a new single from JPEG Mafia called Jesus Forgive Me, I'm a Thought. And the title kind of implies that there seems to be sort of a tent. And pretty much the intent here is to save oneself from prior, frivolous activities. Now, since we're going off the definition of thought and not something else, I think thought, like, if I had to define it, pretty much is just a person. Typically, unfortunately, it's relegated to just females, but a person of the female gender who is usually relegated to chasing attention through promiscuity, and usually using their features to get attention. And this has been kind of shifted a little bit too, because you can call anyone a thought because a lot of people chase attention. So it's not necessarily having to be of the sexual nature, but that's kind of where that word was born, next to also being the father was Instagram, I guess you could call it, and the mother was the attention. But anyway, Jesus Forgive Me, I'm a Thought. I look at that and it's a JPEG Mafia title, and it's also interesting the way he's advertised his upcoming project, because it seems like there's going to be a full-length project. He's been doing it in a pretty, not necessarily abstract way, but kind of flipping the idea on its head. Typically, when an artist promotes their new project or single or album, they kind of just like they say certain things or hint at certain things, but Peggy's pretty much stayed consistent with his experimental characteristics. And so far as that, he said, like, disappointment is coming and I'm going to let you guys down, sort of kind of flipping your expectations almost in a way, because you're used to people being like sort of overconfident, sort of brash. And I guess a perfect, not necessarily perfect comparison might be IDK with the way he's been rolling out his album and talking about like how he believes is the best. And it's always good to have confidence, but it's interesting to see kind of Peggy flip that idea of like how we are advertised to by artists on its head. And so, like I said, he has characteristics which would people are not necessarily used to, and his music fits that exact same pocket. He's kind of in that avenue of like making what I guess you could consider experimental, and thankfully I think he's been able to get people to shed that idea that he's just like diet death grips or something like that, where people are like, oh my god, he's death grips, but like it's just one of them. And so with the actual song, we're gonna get into the music. I find it pretty interesting because what it reminds me of is sort of when I heard the Who. I heard the Who, I was like, okay, this is like a significantly softer JPEG Mafia. And obviously the way that that song works, it sort of, it still has the JPEG Mafia experimental flair with the sort of 2D sound effects and other little jokes, and sort of making fun of the internet and also making fun of a lot of things within that realm, but also kind of showing a tender side still within that. So you don't have to necessarily like not dumb down, but simplify your message if you're talking about a general emotion that the population also feels. With Jesus Forgive Me, I'm a Thought, the sound is a little more abrasive this time, but it relaxes into a more sullen, dark guitar that kind of not lazily, but very sleepily like travels along, and we sort of travel along with JPEG as he lists these various things that people pray for. And the one that was interesting to me was pray you get comfortable in that mask. The idea that some people that may be considered thoughts for attention or other means are quote unquote thoughts because it's the perfect way to monetize oneself. It's the perfect way to make a living. And sometimes in reality are living, even though the idea of thought is usually someone on Instagram throwing their butt out, or their their chest, and just being like, yo, look at me, I'm friggin' out here in the middle of Hawaii. But like, it ain't about that, it's about life. So that idea that this is what people want to do, and taking that idea and selling it as monetizing it, is not necessarily what everyone wants to do. I'm sure not every single one of those people who you might consider a thought is in it for that reason. Typically, it's usually easier to do the things that get you money the fastest. And this is sort of something I talked about in the If You Pray Right aftertaste, where basically, you know, we try to go for the easiest reward. And sometimes that might be the not necessarily a downfall, but it might not be the best decision. And here, sort of the sullen nature that's behind this, the depressive nature behind this track, sort of implies that, especially with that line, I pray you feel comfort in your mask, and you find a way to, even if it's something you don't like doing, it's something that helps you survive. Like I said, in reality, most of the time people work retail jobs or 9 to 5s that they have the utmost disdain for, but it's also something that helps them survive. And the trick to really avoid getting trapped within just surviving and actually thriving is that you find things outside of that pocket that allow you to enjoy something you really want to do. And then once you're able to sort of overcome that situation, you can move into, slowly but surely, progress as a human being. So beyond just that line, there's a few other ones where he's constantly talking about prayer. And even though I did say that thought is not necessarily just attributed to sexual promiscuity and attention seeking actions on social media, there is a line where he talks about like this person who's praying to keep their pussy closed. And I don't think he's necessarily trying to degrade anybody who is sexually active constantly, but more talk about how people are trying to avoid sometimes the very thing that drives them, and avoid the very things that are important to them. And again, you get sort of sucked into this world, and once you get sucked into that world, can you get out? Or something that's like easily able to corrupt you, even though you might feel like you have the best intentions. It sort of feels like the classic saying, basically, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I feel like that's sort of what this song is going for, with the sullen nature that's behind it, with the very almost dark and sort of rainy feeling. And even though it does soften up, it's really cool how he's able to use sort of like, there's a part where he sings like count your blessings for real, and then uses, as his like real hits that higher register, then the song kind of shifts it so he's able to carry right back into another verse. And he does talk about like how he puts a lot of work into his craft, a lot of work into this music, and it does strike. But like I said, I feel like the general feeling that's behind this is sort of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so you must remember to count your blessings and appreciate what's in front of you before it deteriorates, because you're sort of delving back into other things that are not necessarily productive or able to help you sort of be better at whatever you're trying to do. But yeah, it's as far as song structure goes, I really like the sonicality. I like the way it shifts from the crowd sounds, and the way it kind of almost perfectly loops. If you're listening to it without looking at the time progress, you might get confused because it's like, oh God, like it sounds as though the crowd is like, because the crowd is the start point. Sounds like it's about to be a live song, and then it shifts into just like a studio track, and then towards the end it shifts back into the crowd, and it loops back together, and it's sort of again fueling that characteristic of getting trapped within behaviors that are not necessarily good for you, that are not necessarily what reality might dictate. And sometimes it's hard to really get out of that. It's hard to get out of survival mode and being able to enjoy things. So remember to try and enjoy things. Overall, I think this song is cool. It's great to see Peggy has returned and brought us some interesting things via depression memes and sort of the format of which he's been advertising this. And I'm excited to see if there will be a full project, which I think there's going to be a full project, and it's going to be fun to see what that is, what that encompasses. This was a nice little peek into that window. And yeah. Well, this guy says, even if Jesus doesn't forgive you, make sure to forgive yourself. Because life is hard enough if you're battling yourself. I'm just saying. Mistakes exist. All right, this is gonna be the end of the stream, which means I'm gonna click the button. I'm gonna hope the button actually clicks, because I'm gonna feel stupid if I click it and I just make a face and it's just like, oh no, you didn't actually do it. You didn't actually do it. Oh no, you didn't actually do it.